right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Real Freedom Podcast, where we talk about building wealth, gaining time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. And real estate is a contact sport. It's, dealing with people, building relationships. And so for a lot of people, you get business through referrals. And so today's guest, we have Stacey Brown Randall. And she teaches business owners how to generate referrals naturally without asking, manipulating, or incentivizing, which I know a lot of us in real estate do, so that you don't have to compromise the value of your relationship. So you focus not only on real estate, also legal, financial, professional services, and design industries. Multiple award-winning author of the book, Generating Business Referrals Without Asking. You also have your own podcast and you're a national speaker. So a wealth of information talking about referrals. So it's going to be most things referrals today. So welcome, Stacey. We're so excited to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I'm excited to be here. And I loved how you said real estate is a contact sport, because I think people they know that, but unless they've actually ever been an agent, they really have no idea. I remember back in the day when I used to have my license, I don't remember, it was the first couple of months that I was a realtor, and somebody says, "How's it going? How's it going?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I love everything about this industry except for the people." It was just
which is all of it? No, I'm just kidding.
Which feels like most of it, right? I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." But it is helping people make decisions when there's a lot of emotion involved, and navigating that and staying nice, steady Eddie, it's definitely something I think you get better at the longer you're in the industry.
Yeah. And I'm an extreme introvert by nature. And so I know people, that I've done the podcast with are intrigued to find that out because they don't know me full time. But outside of this, I want nothing to do, I love talking with people. I like working with people. And at the same time, when I shut it off, and it's go recharge. And my wife's the same way. She's a therapist and she just likes to recharge too. So yeah, it's interesting, but it's a stressful industry. Yeah. You're dealing with lots of money, lots of emotions. Even from the referral piece, I talked with people and it's we need to set the precedent that there will be challenges, there will be complications during your real estate transaction. That doesn't mean we're not doing a good job. That doesn't mean that we can't get it across the finish line, but it's a people industry. Mistakes happen. And so how can we kind of pre-frame there will be hurdles in your way? It's not a smooth process to closing. And that's how we earn the 5-star, testimonial from you, but we overcome those challenges. So yeah, it's a tough industry.
It really is. It's so interesting. One of the things that we teach inside one of our programs called Referable Client Experience, it's like everyone's like, "Oh, okay, great. How do I do the referral piece?" Right? Within the client experience and working with my clients, the number one thing we teach is managing expectations. Above anything else. There's lots of great things we teach, but I'm like, if you can't manage expectations, particularly in an industry where you don't control everything that's going to happen with your client and to your client and for your client throughout the process, if you don't manage expectations, it's like setting up a recipe for disaster. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, having watched some of the material that you've done, the videos that you've done, there's a lot of misinformation or myths out there about referrals. And I think that would be a good place to start. What do you see out there that people like myself in real estate or people in other service industries like this are talking about referrals where you're like, "Oh my gosh, it's like nails on a chalkboard. I want to change your mindset about the referrals and how it works"?
Oh my gosh. I really do love this question, because it's like a week can't go by without me seeing some post on social media or some newsletter that lands in my inbox, or just seeing all the promotional and all the content that's out there around referrals. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're doing such a disservice to the people who are going to read that and believe it."
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, and I'm not saying it in terms of it, one big thing I see now. So the piece that you have to ask to get referrals, that bad information, that myth has been around for longer than we've been alive, right? It's been around for decades, generations. Same with incentivizing and the networking to know a ton of people. And some of those have been around for a really long time, or being promotional and gimmicky, which I see a lot in the real estate industry. I call those my old school referral triggers. So things people have been taught for decades about how to generate referrals. But the new stuff I'm seeing now is publish a newsletter and you'll get referrals. or just do content marketing and you'll get referrals, or your CRM can give you referrals. And I'm like, what? I was like, it goes against all of the science about what's actually happening when referrals are happening. I'm not saying you can't put out a great piece on social media and maybe have someone see it in the right moment and think, oh, I've been meaning to actually refer Mike, right? I mean, I'm not saying it won't happen. It won't happen often and it won't happen consistently. And that's usually what people want when it comes to referrals. They want it consistently. They want to know that there's things that they are doing that are going to allow the referrals to happen. And so it just, yeah, I mean, it drives me crazy. There's a lot of muttering that happens sometimes on a weekly basis for me inside my office. Thank goodness I don't work anywhere near where my children can hear me. When I see stuff like that, because I think it's just such a disservice to the people who really want to understand referrals. And then they see something like that and they're like, oh, I got to do a newsletter. Oh, I just got to do some content marketing, or I just got to put some posts out there on social media. I'm like, no, that's actually not how it's going to work. It may work that one time and that'll be awesome. But if you're like me, you want it consistently.
One thing that really jumped out that I love, obviously we get show notes of topics and things to talk about when we're on the podcast. And the one that jumps out to me, because I feel like, so I was on the admin side of real estate for 6 years before I became an agent. And, I would build systems to help our agents. And here you have how to build a referable client experience. And I think so many times the mindset around referrals is gimme, 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 right? Like, I want your referrals. I need your referrals. And the reality is have we even focused on creating an experience that people want to refer to? Because how many businesses have we experienced where it's like, you know what, I'm glad I never have to deal with them again, or I've been on hold. I don't want to refer anybody to them. And so it's kind of the taking extreme ownership for your experience. Am I creating an experience that people even want to refer people to me?
Oh, I love that you had that experience and that expertise, because you see it, right? I mean, instantly you're able to recognize, like, a lot of times people will say, okay, Stacey, I want to get more referrals, right? And I'll hear this, like when I'm on podcast, a host will be like, okay, great. What are the 5 steps to get referrals? And I love it. And we should talk about it because they're great. But the reality is I always have to come back and say, okay, here's my disclaimer. If I'm going to teach you some of the strategies about how to start generating referrals or get more referrals from the people who've referred you in the past, the very first place we have to start, or I have to make an assumption that you're good at, is that you actually have that referable client experience. And I don't mean perfect, and I don't mean nothing ever goes wrong, but I mean, you know how to set expectations, you have processes and systems in place, right? Like, things can keep flowing throughout the process, and it's repeatable for every single client, not just every once in a while a client gets this amazing experience because you're really on it, right? And then the rest of the time you're so busy, you're not on it. And other people get a like a meh kind of experience, right? And so it really is like the baseline of everything I teach is that you actually people have to want to refer you for you to be referable. Like, it's a very much a foundational piece of it. But I think people misunderstand what it means to be a referable client experience, because they're going to say, oh, well, I mean, I can't be perfect all the time. I'm like, good, because I'm not either. Like, that would be terrible to try to live up to that. And that's the only way to get referrals. And so what we teach in that referable client experience, it's a 2-pronged approach to that training. And we really look at your client experience. We break it down by the definition of it, the stages of it, the formula of how it works from the referral side of it. And then we talk about, okay, now here are moments where you can infuse referral seed language, or you can do a wow factor that'll get you the potential to get referrals if there are any to be gathered throughout the time that that client is working with you. It's not the only strategy your business needs in place. And in fact, it's not always the first strategy that I start with folks, depending on where they are, but it is absolutely one of the 3 foundational strategies I tell folks, we have to get this right if you want longevity with the referrals that you're going to receive. So yes, that referable client experience, it's one of our 3 foundational strategies that we teach. And lots of times I'm like, we can't go any further until we get this one fixed.
So what would you recommend, or kind of what do you see out there in terms of a referable client experience? Where are there gaps? Because we all have blind spots, and a business owner likes to think their business is the best business possible. So where do you typically see some of those gaps where maybe they're dropping the ball and they're not seeing that kind of referable client experience?
Yeah, so this is one of those that I would say that I feel like this piece gets overlooked because we're so excited to get the new client. We're like, yes, we got the agency signed. We're going to do the things we need to do to get their house ready, do the things we need to do, right, to help them purchase a house, whatever it is. Like, you get the new client and it's like off to the races to get that client going with the work side of the client experience, and they forget the relationship side. And you want to start building that from the beginning. So we break client experience down into, there's a new stage, then there's an active stage, and then there's an alumni stage. So unless you're in a business where your clients never leave you, like a CPA, you want to do their taxes every year, financial advisor, you want to manage their money every year, they never leave the active stage. But for most of us, they're new, and then they're active, and then they're alumni. And obviously they move from active to alumni when you're done working with them, right? But you have to determine how long your new stage is. Usually it's like a moment in the client experience. You're like, okay, when this happens, now we're in active stage. It's usually very seamless. And some people have very short new stages and some people have very long ones. But throughout the new, active, and even alumni stage, most folks are really good at executing on what we call the work touch points. It's getting the contract signed, doing the negotiation, sending over the paperwork, having the conversation, talking the client off the ledge, right? They're really good about like that work touch points. And that's anything and everything is where you're actually delivering work, or even it's a communication, a conversation, right? It's still about work. What they miss though is that relationship piece. It's the relationship touch points. It's the touch points you do that build those relationships. And there's really early on, the key one that I see people miss is the being so happy to get a new client and off to the races you go, is forgetting what your client is thinking and what they are going through in that moment. And when somebody makes the decision to work with you, and I'm not ever talking about a repeat client, because by its very nature of someone coming back to you again means you're doing awesome, right? So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a new client, even when they're referred to you, right? But a new client that's made the decision to work with you, we all do it. Even when we buy a pair of shoes, it doesn't matter. We all do it. We have momentary feelings, and the bigger the purchase, the longer those feelings last, of buyer's remorse. And so many people overlook that. And that was something I figured out pretty early on in this business when it was its first iteration before I moved it to just focus on referrals, is realizing at the time I was a productivity and business coach, is realizing like I'm about to pay this person a whole bunch of money and talk to them about all of my problems and have them fix it. Oh, do I really want to do that? Like, that was the buyer remorse moment people had after saying yes to working with me, when I was a productivity and business coach. And the simple things, like just a handwritten note with a very specific message addressing the buyer's remorse, can move mountains in terms of it being like, oh yeah, I totally made the right decision in hiring Stacey, or I totally made the right decision in hiring Mike. And so most people write that thank you note, right? There's people listening right now and they're like, oh yeah, I totally write that thank you note. I'm like, thanks for being the client, sign my name. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, and you can use the same language. You don't have to like try to come up with a different note every time you do it. It can be repetitive because it's still speaking to the buyer's remorse moment. But just take some time and really think about, what are they thinking? What are they going through? And making sure they know that you know that, and you've got everything in control, and that you're in this journey together. So we call, the one I teach my clients in within Referable Client Experience, is what we talk about is, it's the journey card. I'm on this journey with you. And that helps us in the link. And so, the architect may use something different than the real estate agent, than the financial advisor, but it's like, hey, I'm your co-pilot. We're on this journey together. And just really recognizing that level of comfort. Because remember, for someone to make the decision down the road or right away to refer you, you still have to get through the know, like, and trust factor, right? Just as they have to go through know, like, and trust to decide to hire you, they got to go through it again while they're working with you to decide they're going to actually put their reputation on the line and refer to you. Now, of course, people who aren't clients can refer you too. We talk about all different types of referral sources, but when we're talking about clients referring you, they have got to feel taken care of. And like, hey, and if it does go south, I know Stacey's going to fix it, because she's addressed early on, usually in the buyer's journey step, before they say yes, and then reiterating it in the new client stage. Here's the expectation of what could go wrong and what we need to deal with, what we need to be prepared for. So yeah, I think that's probably an easier one that folks can just, a tactical, practical tip, like, okay, let's make sure we implement this, and really just meeting the client where they are emotionally.
What thoughts do you have in terms of getting feedback from them throughout the journey. So let's just say here, I'm an agent, we've got our process here. Maybe asking for feedback throughout the process, or a satisfaction survey throughout the process. I'm not talking about at closing afterwards, but what are your thoughts, or what tips do you have for people kind of throughout the journey? Now, it's different if it's a point of sale, like I bought something and now I'm out the door. Here, it might be 30, 60, 90 days we're working with people, but what tips do you have, or what thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is always making sure you're going to get what they're really thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you do it and how you do it and the delivery mechanism of doing it is going to matter whether or not you can actually pull out of them if you're really wanting feedback versus just future language maybe you'll use in a testimonial. If you're really wanting to pull out feedback, I think it depends on like kind of when you're doing it, what they're going through in that journey, and are the way that you're asking the questions or requesting that information going to have them give you what you really want to hear about truly how it's going, because there's always self-doubt happening no matter what stage people are in as they're moving through this process. It's just natural, right?
Yeah.
And so if you don't prepare them in advance that, hey, throughout this process, I'm going to reach out to ask you how it's going. It doesn't serve either one of us for you just to tell me everything's fine. And if it's not, those are going to be your moments to tell me, or you come to me and tell me if I haven't asked you how it's going. But if you want someone to get open and honest with you, you need to tell them when they're still like in the honeymoon phase that that's going to be something you're going to do. And then you can use that same language when you actually reach out to get that feedback.
Because I'm thinking, moving one step upstream of the referable client experience, can we get their feedback to find out if we are giving a referable client experience to them? And what I find with a lot of people in real estate, the hard thing is like, they don't necessarily want to know their wounds, like they're from a disc profile, they're a high I, right? So they're a people pleaser. They don't want to hear that people aren't happy with them. And I think that's sometimes what stops people from asking for feedback throughout the process, is because they frankly don't want it to hurt their ego or them to feel bad, because they get all their joy in thinking that I'm making everybody happy. And so I think that's a realistic, hard thing. And I consult real estate teams and help them with setting up admin processes too. And that's what I find from people is the hard thing is like, I kind of am afraid to ask because I don't want to hear that I'm not doing something well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I work, like you said earlier, with a lot of different industries, but when I am working with a real estate agent, like if I didn't know they were an agent, I would know it by some of the conversations that we have. But when we're going through identifying like who are their existing referral sources, which is usually an agent's low-hanging fruit in terms of where you can start getting more referrals quicker. And it's usually where we start. It's like, let's start with people who've referred you in the past and then take better care of them with my methodology and my language and stuff to get more referrals from them. And it's always interesting when they're going through that list of referral sources and then they're looking through that list. And some of them are clients that, that have also referred them. And they're like, oh yeah, they referred me early on. And then it wasn't a really good experience that they had with me as a client. And so people start getting removed. And sometimes I always ask the agent, is it true? Like, are you sure? Or is that just what's up in your head? And I think it's important because we're so close to things. I mean, we know when things blow up, right? I mean, there's some things where like, we can tell someone's mad, but like, it's also that it's managing that relationship throughout all those pieces, which always, I believe, puts you in a place of like peace when things blow up, because yeah, I told you they were going to, let's talk about it. This doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make me a bad person, doesn't make that crazy buyer a bad person, just maybe makes them crazy, right? Like, let's talk about it. We knew this could happen. It puts you, just in that place of like making sure you are comfortable managing through the, all the unhappiness that may happen. And so when I see agents come to me and they're like, yeah, I got to take some people off the list. Things did not end well. It's really sad, but a lot of times it has to do with that piece.
And I think also people understanding you're not going to win them all. There are just transactions that don't go well. There's sometimes you don't mesh with people the same way. I mean, in this case, you're not always choosing your clients. And so, yeah, sometimes you just don't mix well. And so you're still there to help them. And it's okay to let that person go, because you might be doing more of a disservice by continually trying to keep them in the fold when they're unhappy. It's best to just kind of say, hey, that was a bad transaction, and we'll just work on getting the next one right with the next relationship that we have. In terms of, important things that you want us to know, what have we kind of missed here? What's important that you want to make sure that we cover?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. We need hours. Like we don't
Mhm.
need hundreds of hours, but we definitely need time. Like I think there's some things for people to understand, like how we define a referral and what that
Mhm.
actually means. There's a lot of misinformation out there about word of mouth referrals or referral marketing. And like those are actually not true. Like it's referrals are separate from the marketing that you do, and word of mouth buzz is separate from a referral that you may receive. So I think the definition and defining, like when a referred prospect shows up, like making sure you understand it's because they've been connected to you. And of course, they have a need. The prospect knows of their prospect. And then
Mhm.
understanding the science behind referrals. And there's a lot of pieces to the science of why someone refers you and then what you do from a science perspective to be able to generate more referrals and do it in a way that's authentic and in a way that's good, right? In a way that's positive. But I think a lot of people think referrals are about them. And most of the time when I tell people, no, they're not about you at all, they're like, wait, what? They're like, what do you
Mhm.
mean? Like, if you're giving me a referral, it's growing my business. This is amazing. And I'm always like, no, actually, when I make the decision to refer to Mike, it has nothing to do with Mike, right? It really has nothing to do with you. It's I'm talking to somebody who has a problem or has a need, and you're the person that I trust to solve the problem for my friend, my colleague, right? My business buddy. And
Mhm.
so the referral happens because I want to help somebody. You're just the solution provider as how I'm going to help them, right? So understanding the science behind referrals, because your strategy should be built on what's actually happening when referrals are being given, and then recognizing that referrals only come from relationships. So how do you have the right strategies in place to maintain relationships and to cultivate relationships with those who are referring you now, your existing referral sources? What about those potential referral sources, the people you wish would refer you, your referable client experience? There's all these facets to it to be a really well built, right? Like really having a business that is built for referrals. And I think that's really important that I think people don't always know. It's like, it's not just a strategy or a tactic or one script that you use. It's looking at it as, hey, we want to build a referable business. And there's some facets that we need to put in place. But once they're in place, then we just let them run, right? We just make sure the
Mhm.
process keeps going.
And then two, I'm just thinking, so when I'm referring people to, other vendors, because obviously as real estate agents or people in the real estate industry, lots of people in other ancillary businesses. What happens when you give out a referral to somebody else and that person has a bad experience? Because I've had it before where it's like, oh yeah, you should talk to so and so, and then I come to find out that so and so, right, mistakes happen. Sometimes they do a good job with clients and sometimes they fumble it, and they have a bad experience. So how can you help people when maybe they've given out a referral to somebody and it goes south?
Yeah, I think that the onus on that is always actually on the business that received the referral. Like I
Mhm.
think as someone who like gives referrals and that may go south, I'll always have a conversation with someone about, okay, what happened? What went wrong? Was there anything that I needed to address with the person I was referring to? Most of the time we know when we're referring a crazy client. And so we can
Mhm.
just excuse some things because of that. Most of the time we're not referring crazy clients, but
Mhm.
I think it's understanding the situation. But then sometimes it is a conversation with the referral source. Like, hey, this went on, like, what am I missing? But really, none of my clients, right? My goal is that none of my clients would be in a position to where a referral source comes to them and says, hey, I heard this client I sent to you had a really bad experience. What happened?
Mhm.
That would be a big red flag for me in terms of for my clients, I want you to be managing the message, right? Back to your referral source about what's actually going on. There's two sides to every story, but you
Mhm.
need to be getting to your referral source with yours. Not, it doesn't, I don't care if you're not first, but you better be doing the outreach before they're having to come to you to ask. And
Mhm.
that's just part of having the processes in place to be able to do that and the relationship with your referral sources to be able to pick up the phone and be like, hey, you referred me so and so. I just need to give you a heads up on something.
Awesome. Anything more that you want to share with us here? Any kind of parting tips?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me, like, where do I start? Like, that's
Mhm.
like, there's a lot I can learn, right? We talked about a number of different things, existing referral sources, potential referral sources, referable client experience. And that's like three of the 18 things that I teach. And
Mhm.
so people are always like, where do I start? And I always say, when it comes to referrals, you want to start with your low hanging fruit. And the number one way to determine how you can grow your referrals this year is by realizing what is real in your business when it comes to referrals. And so, how many referrals do you average on any given year? Like, how many referrals did you get last year, maybe in 2021, maybe even in 2020? But also knowing how many people are referring you And if you have more than half a dozen people currently referring you, that is your low-hanging fruit to get more referrals in the future and faster usually, versus if you don't have anybody referring you or just one or two or three people referring you, then you probably need to focus on cultivating new people into referral sources. And so it's always like, where do I start? And I always say it is dependent on how many people do you have referring you right now. That'll tell me which direction I would send you in terms of understanding what it looks like to get more referrals within the next 12 months.
Well, there's so much more we could talk about. And I think it also speaks to the value that you can provide somebody, because this isn't hey, I watched this webinar and now I'm good and my referral business is going to take off. We really got to go back to the foundation here in the root and talk about it. And so I know you've got a lot of great content and you help a lot of people. And so, yeah, we can't cover it in a 30-minute podcast episode. And so that's why they need to reach out to you. So for people that this does resonate with and they want to learn more, how can they do so?
Yeah. So the website is a great home base where people can find the podcast, they can find the book, they can go to the resources freebie page and start like just digging into what we have available. It's StaceyBrownRandall.com, and Stacey is spelled with an E. But if you're really like listening to this and you're like, I kind of want to know how good I am at referrals, we actually have a quiz. It's called the Referral Ninja Quiz that you can take. You just go to referralquiz.com and it'll pull up like a 9-question quiz. It's crazy how well I know where you are just from these 9 questions. And we'll actually tell you what level of referral ninja you are at. Are you at the beginner level, or maybe at the master level? Are you somewhere in between? And then your results will provide a roadmap to, okay, you're at the beginner level. Here's what it looks like to move up to that master level. And I think that's really important for people to understand where you are, what is real, and then do you want to do the work to actually move up to generate more referrals? Because making that decision really is the very first thing you have to commit to.
Yeah, we live in an industry where it's chasing shiny objects, and the idea of like, oh, I want to increase my referral business because now we're into 2023 and that's my new goal. So I'm going to go watch this one thing. And then a week later, I move on to 3 other things. And so, yeah, you have to understand it's going to take time, and you have to be willing to do the hard work. So yeah, for those here in real estate, like I highly recommend take the time, take the assessment. And if this is an area that you're looking to grow, check out your program, because like I said, we only scratched the surface. There's 15 different things I wanted to be able to cover in this episode. And so that's why you need to reach out and learn more. So thank you so much for coming on the show. You shared a lot of wisdom in this short period of time, and just excited to see your business continue to grow.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it. And happy to be a repeat guest if we need to keep digging down into referrals. It would be my pleasure. Thank you.